going to introduce Dina Tyler now. And Dina Tyler is a peer specialist and advocate for recovery-oriented services and mental health. She works in the San Francisco Bay Area. She is the Director of Peer and Family Services in PrEP, which is Prevention and Recovery in Early Psychosis, for the Felton Institute. She is also a co-founder, facilitator, and board member of the Bay Area Hearing Voices Network. She is the director of the Bay Area Mandala Project, a group working to create whole health alternatives for people experiencing extreme states. She was awarded the prestigious Peer Specialist of the Year by the National Council for Behavioral Health in 2015. Please welcome Dina Tyler.
Hi everyone. This is my first ISEPP conference, and I'm very honored to be here. It has been a long road to get to a place where I can talk about what I went through in the mental health system. What I say can be looked at with the perspective of fear and judgment, or openness and curiosity. So I invite you to stay open and curious with me, especially since the title of my speech is The Meaning of Life. While I was growing up, yelling and fighting filled my household, and I hated arguments. I wanted to be as unnoticeable as possible and wished so badly I could be mute. I felt if I was quiet and hid in my room, I was less likely to be yelled at. I never felt like I fit in, and I was an extremely quiet child. I found refuge in my room and would spend a lot of time alone. I began retreating into my own head, what I called the spirit world. I would see spirits and hear voices. I was raised without religion, so I didn't have a solid framework for understanding the spirits in the spirit world I discovered. My mother was Catholic and my father was Jewish. Both of his parents were Holocaust survivors. My grandfather lost his faith after finding out his entire family was killed. So my parents decided to raise us without any religion, and instead let us choose for ourselves when we got older. However, from a very young age, I had my own sense of spirituality. I would ponder things very deeply and come up with what seemed like the best way to be a good person. I felt a bit lonely in that I didn't have a spiritual community like other people, but I'm happy I was allowed to listen inside and trust in my own sense of spirituality. However, while I spent so much time in my room alone, I began to have a voice that would yell at me. I would also get premonitions and strange coincidences. While some of these things were very unsettling, other experiences were positive and would provide me helpful guidance. In high school, I would hang out with friends that were into metaphysics and esoteric beliefs. However, I was tormented by a demon and voices that made me feel worthless and urged me to die. I went to a psychic who taught me the dark spirits were feeding off of my fear. She encouraged me to explore why the demon was there, and she told me to send love and compassion to the things I was afraid of, like the demon and angry voices. Not an easy switch to do, because I had to change. However, this perspective worked, and I regained my sense of power, and the demon went away. This was a key moment for me, and the essence of what I want to convey to you. By responding with love and not fear, I changed the reality. And if I had been responded to with love and not fear, I would have not been pulled into the mental health system. Perspective is key. It shapes how we see and operate in this world. It is the foundation for how we respond to the situations we encounter. Having altered states of consciousness, by definition, shifts how you interact with the world, or more specifically, what is defined as consensus reality. How these experiences are viewed by those close to the one going through an altered state of consciousness shapes what happens next. To paraphrase R.D. Laing, if you truly wake up and realize that reality is the dream, or worse, that it is actually the nightmare, those who are still asleep will think you are crazy. The mental health system is designed to get us to fall asleep to this crazy reality. Yes, I had altered states, but would those states be scary or would they be transformational? It depended not only on me, but on how the people around me responded. That experience with the demon, however, made me fearful of the psychic stuff and the spirit world. I wasn't ready to walk down this immense spiritual path, and since I didn't have anyone to really guide me, I closed it all off. I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder right before college, and was prescribed Adderall sustained release. This was my first experience of medicalizing my experiences. I started eating and sleeping less because the Adderall was always in my system. After my first 2 years, when I was about to transfer to UC Berkeley, my father suffered a heart attack and couldn't work. So I took a year off from school, moved back in with my father, and got a job at the Cool Record store in San Diego. The next year, I headed to UC Berkeley to resume my studies. However, while I was couch surfing, looking for an apartment, I was drugged without my knowledge and raped by the person I was staying with. This was just a week before classes began, so I did not have time to process it. I had to bury it. I spiraled downward from taking more medication and eating and sleeping less. I began to detach from my body and slip into catatonic states. I remember just staring at the wall, listening to the voices, and not knowing 3 hours would pass. I was retreating back into that world inside my head that had been safe for me when I was young. I began to have overwhelming premonitions that there would be a terrorist attack at Times Square in New York on Y2K. This was fueled by Nostradamus predictions I had encountered years earlier. I did not feel right, and I was utterly depressed. My dad took me back to a psychiatrist. I was diagnosed with major depression and psychosis NOS, not otherwise specified. He prescribed me an antidepressant and an antipsychotic. He told me I would need to drop out of college and enter a partial hospitalization program. I started a journal on my second day of partial hospitalization, and I recently decided to read it. I had not read it since I wrote it. I wanted to share it with you all because these passages highlight the switch upon entering the mental health system from looking at my experiences as spiritual toward a medical model explanation. This is hopefully the first page of a long dedication to writing down my thoughts and feelings in this journal. I guess it is a time for starting over and retraining myself to do all the self-help things I've been told are helpful all throughout life, but yet have never taken the time to do. The end result, hopefully being a little less screwed up. It is weird to be going through so much self-awareness since I've started partial hospitalization. I had a big thing with reality today. I think that the Zyprexa is starting to work because I felt a little different today, but only in spurts. I started realizing that the people and surroundings around me are actually real, that everything actually does exist, and that I exist too. Today, I came into an understanding about the voices inside my head. I found out that they are supposed to be not normal. I hear what seems like cafe chatter inside my head. I remember now the old woman who used to yell at me as a kid. Hey, it seems like when the voices are actually speaking to me, they're speaking over a loudspeaker or an echoed voice, and they're usually yelling at me. It broke my heart when I reread this part of my journal, because that was the moment, the day that I found out I was abnormal. I wasn't just ADHD, I was sick. I'm kind of scared about getting the label of being schizophrenic. I talked to some other patients today, and they were also leaning towards the label of schizophrenic for me too. I guess hearing voices is a definite bell ringer in most cases. I know that the voices don't really interfere with my behavior, except that most of the time I get lost inside my head and have a hard time with real conversations because the voices crowd my thinking. Also, I remember that when I took Wellbutrin, the voices became much louder. So I guess that this is probably something that does need to be addressed. Hopefully the Zyprexa will help, but I really don't want it to take away my abilities. I want to be able to control my connection with reality in the spirit world. I began to accept tonight that I know things from past lives that others have forgotten or ignored. Like I asked my mom if she knew what it feels like to die. I feel it like a snap, someone turning out the light on your life. And then you just become a soul, and you go into the black spirit world that is inside your head, that you see when you close your eyes. And then in the spirit world, you can imagine and create whatever you want to see. But my mom said she didn't know what it felt like to die. I also asked if she just knows things, because I know things that I have not experienced in this physical life yet. And I know feelings I haven't experienced either. So I think schizophrenia and all of this voices and deja vu and delusions and stuff is really just being in tune with your spirit and soul in this universe, and maybe not so in touch with mortal reality. It is so weird though, when you thought you were normal your entire life, and the voices inside my head are said to be abnormal. I ask other people about voices, and many people don't hear this kind of stuff. Also, I talked with my sister's ex-boyfriend yesterday, and he said that I sounded like I was going through a mania episode when I was figuring out all this stuff in my head about spirituality and the universe and stuff. I guess they would refer to these kinds of thoughts as delusions of grandeur. I really do think that I figured stuff out finally. I really do think that the insane know more truth about the universe than most normal people or doctors. I don't know if I'm a chosen one to know this kind of stuff. I just think that I'm more aware and that I'm a very old soul. I think other insane people are old souls and can just remember better than others. But I think that the Zyprexa will help me to be able to focus my attention more so on the present instead. That will be good. However, I am scared that the ability to have insight and foresight may be at risk with this medication. I need this instinct in order to fulfill my purpose in life of helping other lost souls. So what I want is a good balance, or the ability to do both. Understand both well. Living too much inside my head is having consequences, and so would only living in the present physical world. I was struggling with the medical model and a spiritual framework of my experiences. I was really struggling with accepting this new identity as a mental patient. But after trying all different kinds of meds with awful side effects like tremors, dulled personality, and brain fog, I finally stopped them cold turkey. The withdrawal triggered insomnia and a huge psychosis, but which also had a big spiritual and creative side. I was up for 5 days straight, and I had an epiphany. Here's what I wrote in my journal. I did a lot of thinking last night. I figured out the meaning of life and planned what I want to do in the future and figured out the path to get there. Long and complicated, but that will get me there. I figured out the rest of my life and how to solve all the world's problems in one night. I was sure I had come up with a brilliant plan that would ultimately lead me to becoming the first female president of the United States, where I would run against Chelsea Clinton in the future. And this was in 2000, so it was way before Hillary ever ran for president. I had figured out the solutions to world war and famine. Suddenly, it was like I could see everything so clearly, like I was drawing connections between the stars to form the constellations. I was feeling such peace with the universe and such a connection to humanity. And then I had a huge discovery. I began to think about myself and why I was so unhappy. I was thinking about my new kitten and what she needs to be happy. I figured that she needs food, water, shelter, but also attention and something to play with. Then I began to think about what people, in general everywhere, need to be happy. I figured we need the same basic needs as food, water, and shelter, but we also need love and social connection and belonging. We need to have a sense of purpose. Then I also realized we need self-esteem. I then began to think that all misery is because someone is lacking in one of these basic human needs. And if someone was able to meet all of these needs, Then they could become the supreme human being that they're meant to be. I stopped and thought to myself, wow, I just figured out the meaning of life. So then I proceeded to call everyone I know and told them, I figured out the meaning of life. Maybe if I would have been in the right environment, people may have been really into hearing something like this. But instead, I was calling all the people I worked with at the record store with my excited message about the meaning of life. It didn't go over so well. My mom took me back to the psychiatric hospital where I had gone to partial hospitalization, but this time to the inpatient unit. On the first night, I didn't want to take any meds, and I just told them I wanted to wear myself out by pacing up and down the halls. I really wanted to talk to someone about the meaning of life that I discovered. But while they let me pace for a while, they said they wouldn't talk to me until I agreed to take some meds. I remember asking the staff for my journal so that I could write down all of the wonderful ideas I was having. The staff told me they wouldn't give me my journal until I took the meds. Eventually, I caved in. I got out only a few lines before the meds kicked in, and I didn't write in my journal for the rest of the month that I spent there. My internal reflection, the process of me figuring things out, was cut off by meds, and I lost the most important wellness tool I had for growth. The hospital was a strange experience of challenging the identity that I thought I had. I was pushed in so many ways to redefine my identity as a mental patient. Every little thing was designed to break my self-understanding. Little humiliations were dehumanizing, like being ignored by staff, or not being able to decide for myself when I wanted to wash my hair. In my 3rd week, I was sexually assaulted by another patient. I was 22 and he was in his 50s. It was horrible. I couldn't fight back. I was paralyzed with fear and heavily medicated. The staff eventually came in and pulled him off of me. But it was strange. They were aggressive with me too, and they looked disappointed. They then tried to blame the situation on me. I was just sexually assaulted and in shock, and they are telling me that it is a symptom of my mania, that I was hypersexual. I was so ashamed and confused. How could they not see that I didn't want this to happen? At that point, I realized I am not going to get help in that hospital. I did not feel safe that night, as that man was not removed from the ward. His room was right across the hall from mine, and I couldn't lock my door because they have to do suicide checks. So all I could think to do that was in my power was to tell the staff the next morning that I tried to kill myself to get off that ward. They asked me how, and I quickly had to come up with an answer. I said the bed sheets. They then moved me to the suicide watch ward. But before I could enter the new room, they told me they would have to do a strip search to make sure I don't have anything I could use to hurt myself. At this point, I wanted to yell and say, I have been here for 3 weeks. What do I have? All I have is these pajamas. But I was so broken down, heavily medicated, and didn't know what to think about this entire experience. So a female nurse came in and strip searched me after I had just been raped. I still felt ashamed and embarrassed amongst everything else I was feeling. So then 3 days later, I was told that my insurance had run out and I was being discharged. I had been so traumatized by what had just happened that I wanted to escape into music and drugs. When I came home, my identity was drastically changed. I was treated as a mental patient by work and friends. I had caused so much confusion and nobody knew how to deal with me at the record store. So I was banned instead of reached out to. They even created a policy, the Dina policy. Dina is going through a very rough time right now and is not the Dina we all know and love. She isn't taking care of herself and is her own worst enemy. Our official policy is that Dina no longer works here and will not work here ever again. At this time, I don't even want her visiting the store. I know tough love is hard to do, but it's best for everyone. Dina needs serious professional help. Anything less will do more harm than good. If she comes in, please ask her to leave by my orders. If it'll help, you can show her this letter. Everyone was pushing me into treatment, and all I wanted was a normal life again. For a year, I was very isolated. My life became going to therapy and medication management and DBSA groups at the VA. The medications caused terrible side effects like weight gain, memory problems, and sleeping all the time. And I really wanted to be off of them. This is from my initial assessment at the Gifford Clinic, an outpatient place I went to after. Patient dressed in black Iron Maiden t-shirt, black pants, and black boots. Has big tattoos of bass clefs on her forearms. Poor insight into how disruptive her impulsivity and mania is having on her life and job. Feels she can function fine without medications. Still admits to seeing auras, spirits, and hearing voices. 22-year-old white female with recent episode of mania and possibly depressive episode in December of 1999. However, she also has elements of psychosis, with her being able to see auras and spirits, as well as hearing conversations. These are not in response to drug use and was in between bipolar episodes. Cannot rule out schizoaffective disorder. I couldn't fight anymore. I got on disability and gave in to the messages that I wouldn't work again and would be on meds the rest of my life. That I couldn't trust my own mind. That at any moment I could have another manic episode. Now, I could have kept down that path. But after a year of attending DBSA groups and seeing older people in the group just talk about benefits, meds, and side effects, something deep inside started to fight back. Slowly, I began to challenge those messages and rebuild my life. I got a job and learned that I could challenge that message. Then I came off all my meds, and while it was hard, I eventually ended up being okay. I finally found a guy to date who didn't immediately reject me because of my diagnosis. I also found a therapist who practices energy psychology and was open to exploring a spiritual framework. He saw how the diagnoses were limiting me, how much I hated them. So he said, okay, I will remove them. So at least in our interactions, poof, they were gone. And that was so relieving to me. Finally, I started to feel independent again, and I completely exited the mental health system. I took a couple courses at a local community college, got a job as a banquet server, and had a stable relationship. Then, a couple years later, the life-changing moment came when the restaurant catering department wanted to promote me to become a captain. I was so scared about what the added stress might cause. I had so internalized I wouldn't be able to handle much in my life. I was scared of having another manic episode, and I didn't want to go back to the hospital. But I finally took the promotion and found out I was able to handle the stress. Then I decided to go back to UC Berkeley and finish my undergraduate degree. And I graduated with highest honors. I studied mental health from a sociological perspective. After encountering so much stigma and rejection after I was given multiple diagnoses, I wanted to understand more about how the person who is given a diagnosis is then treated in society. One of the sociological theories that really stuck out to me was the idea of the sick role by Talcott Parsons. The basis of this is that in society, we have many different roles that we fulfill. Parent, child, student, doctor, all these roles come with certain expectations of how you are supposed to act and responsibilities you are expected to undertake. When someone is sick, like with the flu or injury, their responsibilities are absolved for the time that they are sick. However, it is expected that they resume their tasks once they are well, and that you will be accepted back into society if you do as the doctor tells you to do to get better. However, this sick role is supposed to be temporary. But what happens to your identity and your place in society if you are diagnosed with a lifelong chronic condition where people view you might never recover? People find themselves on the outside if their role doesn't contribute to society in an acceptable way. Remember all those commercials promising us that a better life and being accepted back into society is just a pill away? In the beginning, I related to how enticing it can finally be to have a diagnosis, to know what was wrong with me and how to fix it. Take these pills, go to these groups, and you will feel better. I remember being relieved at first to take on the sick role, to be absolved of the enormous expectations that society puts on young people to figure out what you are going to do with the rest of your life before the age of 20. But being viewed as a sick person also came with a huge price. I had to give up my spiritual identity. My recovery has been about getting that back and rejecting the identity that the very people who were trying to help me were forcing me to accept. To do this, I had to find a different community, one in which I would be accepted for who I am. I found out about the consumer survivor ex-patient movement, and that there were people out there who had also been traumatized in hospitals and were advocating to make changes in how people with mental health struggles are treated. I found the Icarus Project and their website logo that says, "You are not alone." And that helped me to find an online community when I was too stuck in isolation to go to a support group in person to meet people. It was great to finally find people who were talking about things other than medications and side effects. Looking back, my greatest healing has come from finding different ways to make sense of my experiences and find meaning. I have returned to embracing a spiritual framework by reframing my crisis as a transformative experience. That maintenance and coping is not the goal. Instead, healing and growth is the goal. That I don't have to see myself as sick or my spiritual views as symptoms. That it is okay to hear voices, see auras and spirits. A couple of years ago, I co-founded the Bay Area Hearing Voices and the Bay Area Mandala Project. Finding communities of people where I feel a sense of belonging, where I can talk to other people like me who have had spiritual experiences, who do not dismiss the voices, where people accept me and truly understand. This has given me space to explore these experiences that I could have used so much when I was younger. In talking to other people that hear voices, I have come to understand that I have power in the relationship. Some voices try to make me feel bad about myself. I can respectfully ask them if they have something they want to communicate to me. I will listen, but they need to deliver their message in a way that I can hear it. They must treat me with respect. I still take the advice of the psychic and send even the mean voices love and compassion, and that helps them to either go away or shift how they interact with me. But I also have extremely helpful voices that provide guidance. I realize that sometimes they speak metaphorically, and sometimes they yell in order to get my attention. They have also quieted down now that I have told them that I will listen to them as long as they promise not to overwhelm me. I have also told them that it has to be up to me of whether I follow their guidance or not. I have had to learn to become the one who discerns between the messages I receive. I have been greatly inspired by the idea of the wounded healer. That in order to learn how to heal others, you must first go through a traumatic crisis or suffering and learn how to heal yourself. Instead of being viewed as the sick role, one is being called to perform the healer role. That you can come out of the experiences stronger and with abilities that contribute to helping the community. What if I had been introduced to someone that had been through it and come out the other side? Someone that could talk on my level, that wouldn't dismiss these experiences as signs of something biologically wrong with me. Peer specialists can fulfill this role as supporter, mentor, and guide. Peers can share about the suffering they have been through in their lives. open themselves up to be vulnerable with another person, and develop a relationship that is healing. Peers can often hold the view that the person is able to come out of these experiences stronger because they are living proof of resiliency. Last year, I was honored with the Peer Specialist of the Year award by the National Council for Behavioral Health for my work with young adults at an early psychosis intervention program through the Felton Institute called PrEP. By trusting my spiritual self, I was inspired to work with others to help them avoid what I encountered. To me, the work I do is simple. I just give people what I would have wanted. And it is simple: to respect their identities and not impose a sick role. To relate and listen, to explore with curiosity. I work to create a relationship of mutuality, mutual support, learning, and acceptance. I share my experience with them as I believe it is important. If I'm asking them to be vulnerable with me, I must also do the same. And this is what helps to overcome isolation, to let them know they are not alone, that they may be struggling, but there is nothing wrong with them. I train staff on using recovery-based, non-stigmatizing language because the message is clear. One's perspective and reactions affect people. If you see people as sick, they will ultimately fulfill that role, especially if there are no other options for gaining acceptance. Respect people's unusual realities. People can sense if you are afraid of them or think what they think is weird. There is nothing worse than feeling like the very person who is there to help you is afraid of you or doesn't get you. Focus on the relationship. Drop the professional distance and too rigid of boundaries. Form friendships and be honest and vulnerable too. Focus on what your heart tells you instead of what you learned in school, because it is hurting people. It hurt me. I have often wondered what would have happened if someone had helped me to unpack what I had discovered as the meaning of life. Years later, someone told me that what I had come up with was similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That what I called becoming the supreme human being that you're meant to be, Maslow had called self-actualization. What if somebody had given me a book or sat down with me back in the hospital and talked this out? There are so many moments where the way people responded could have shifted the direction in my life. For instance, thinking back to when I went to the psychic to have the demon removed. What if my parents had brought me to a psychiatrist instead? Would I have entered the mental health system at 15? On the other hand, what if after being up for 5 days straight, someone had said to my mom, "I think your daughter is going through a spiritual awakening." Instead of going to the hospital, what if she had taken me to a psychic or a peer specialist or someone that could look at my experiences as deeply meaningful to my life? That I was coming up with the changes that I needed to make in my life in order to heal and become the supreme human being that I was meant to be. What if somebody has understood that I was really sensitive to all the injustices in the world and wanted to find a way to help? That my idea of becoming president was simply that I recognized that I would need more power in this world in order to make the changes that I felt would help humanity. That working at a record store was not enough. My life dramatically needed to shift. All I truly needed was to be listened to and to get guidance and to make sense of what was happening, but not to be told I was sick. All people want to be seen, heard, and valued. We strive to gain acceptance and belonging. The perspective that some people are just sick, different, or not normal destroys one's sense of belonging. Just as I discovered in what I called the meaning of life, and Maslow called the hierarchy of needs, we need to have love, belonging, and self-esteem. Maslow stressed that only when we are anchored in community do we develop self-esteem. And self-esteem is how we ourselves know we are worthy individuals. That sense of belonging I found in the consumer survivor ex-patient movement is what helped me to regain my sense of self-esteem and is the only reason I can stand before you today. What kind of belonging are we creating for people? Identity as a diagnosis? As a mental patient? Are we drugging our profits? Or like the title of this conference, Individuals Matter, that there could be acceptance of all humans as unique and diverse individuals that cannot be categorized. We are in this crazy reality together, and we all have a part to play in healing our communities. All of us have healers and visionaries inside us, but we all experience struggles. Life is challenging sometimes. Our own healing and growth can sometimes take a while, because it takes time to overcome our struggles and find the light within our own darkness. But sometimes the best way to brighten our own light is to see and help foster the light in others. So what is the meaning of life? I think this quote sums it up pretty nicely. There is no better exercise for the heart than reaching down and lifting other people up. Thank you.